Welcome to the Opportunity Knocks podcast by EmpowHer Purpose, hosted by me, Michelle Valenzuela Wolf. Every week, we feature different extraordinary female entrepreneurs in the business and wellness segments on just that, opportunities. These segments deep dive into how these courageous women transition into their purpose. We want to give you permission to discover, pursue, and achieve your goals. We learn and reaffirm that life is never linear. It's how we as women choose to take, make, create, and evaluate opportunities. Remember, it's all gonna be okay. Thank you for your support and make sure to subscribe. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited today because I'm being interviewed by my best friend, my bestie. And I had been at a women's group luncheon a few weeks ago, and a friend of mine suggested, you know what, you should once a month have somebody interview you. And I thought, that's a really good idea. And I thought, what better way to start that process and that tradition than inviting Akieva Jacobs, who is one of my closest friends, a little bit like Gayle and Oprah, to the call to interview me. And not only that, but how telling, because it's my birthday week. And so we get to actually release this interview on my birthday. So it feels very special. And I wanted to have somebody come on who I really trusted, somebody that would be willing to give all my deepest, darkest secrets.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And questions. And she's a mother of two girls. We've raised our kids together. And she's quite special to me, like a sister. And I feel excited because I actually just got to celebrate her 50th birthday with 33 of her closest friends in Napa. Don't ask about the weekend. It was crazy.
Right. I'm still trying to get my voice back. So, right.
Exactly. So what I'd love to do, Akieva, is if you can first start by telling people a little bit about yourself and how we met. And we're lucky enough to be acquainted with one another.
So I met the lovely Michelle, oh gosh, now what, almost 18 years ago? And which seems crazy to think about. And at a transitional point in my life where I moved to Los Angeles. I was having my first child. The only other person I knew here was my husband, really. And
in Los Angeles.
Right, in Los Angeles. And we met in a baby group, right? Mm-hmm. Fortunately, Michelle had started in another baby group and then came to our group. So we all got really close during that process and during that time. And we've remained really close. So that's how come we started as friends. And as Michelle said, I'm 50 now. And I think,
oh my God.
Right.
How's that possible?
How is that possible? Right. I'm not a day over 25. But I think what's been so fantastic about our friendship is that we've gone through so many different phases of our life. So it's really special that I get to share this birthday podcast with you. And I have all kinds of questions for you.
Oh, right? I can hardly wait. Right. I'm a little nervous.
Right. No, I won't ask anything too embarrassing.
It's all right. It can only go deep.
Right. Exactly.
So Akieva grew up in Chicago and she moved to the Los Angeles area. So that was like 20 years ago, but your background also is marketing. Yes. And you've had pretty deep, Akieva's got this amazing extensive background, not just in entertainment. And honestly, one of the reasons why she was able to bring 33 women together in Napa, not only because they all like to drink, but it's because she's got this amazingly deep loyalty and ability to connect to people. Wouldn't you say?
Which is what I think I think it's one of the things that we share, right? You have many, many gifts, but I think one of the things that, we always talk about what your belief structure, your value structure. And I think loyalty is one that's very important to both of us. So I had friends this past weekend that were from friends, all that I've been friends with since like kindergarten, right? That and friends from fourth grade or high school or college or grad school. And we've maintained these relationships because I think you understand that life has its own course, and there's times that you can come back into each other's lives, and it's sometimes people go in different directions, but it's not necessarily personal like you. So so I think you have to be patient with people in that way and understand that life will take you in different directions, but when you have a real friend, you always come back to each other. So
absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I do think that loyalty and trust are two things that people put a lot of faith in us in that way. So, and we give a lot to relationships. So I think that's part of it too. And like you said, it's like people come back to us years later that we haven't talked to, but it feels like it was just yesterday.
Yeah. It was funny. I think you remember this, during the pandemic, or still the pandemic, but during the lockdown phase of things, I think, you're spending a lot of time with your family, right? And I think, right, a lot. And I think my husband hadn't realized how much time really goes into sometimes maintaining those friendships, right? So he was like, gosh, you really do like talk to these people, and I was like, yes. Maybe that's the difference between men and women too, but but part of it is, I don't think that friendships or relationships should be hard work, but it does take some work, right? That like
maintenance, right?
maintenance,
I mean, like,
right.
not
It
just
shouldn't
the
be
technical
hard,
thing.
but it is work, I should say, right?
Absolutely. So tell me, let's get right to it. What do you want to ask me?
Okay, all right. What do I want to ask you?
This is all about opportunities, as we know, how we take, make, create, and evaluate opportunities.
Right.
And just like how we met, it was an opportunity. It was a conscious thought I think we both had to come to one another and be like, hey, I think she's somebody I can actually invest in, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's one of the things that I love about you, and I've always, I mean, obviously you have this immense energy, right? That like, you're like a force, like, it's just, all of this is like a big ball of energy. And what's fabulous is like, you will see things, or you created something in your mind, and you really have a way of bringing it to fruition, right? And so not just as far as and even sometimes through things where you yourself may be unsure about it, right? But you will take that leap anyway, right? And so I guess my first question kind of is more related to that. I mean, if we're gonna go there, I'm gonna go there, right?
Go, girl.
So what have you done in those situations where you've been scared? And how did you convince yourself to move forward anyway?
Well, anybody who knows me knows that, I'm sure Julian will tap into this call, but I actually used to have a lot of fear when I was younger, a lot. And I used to stop myself from doing many things that I wanted to do, whether that might be like, living somewhere else. I always wanted to live somewhere else. And it never came to fruition, almost because I was waiting for somebody else to give me permission, meaning like, oh, well, if it's for your job, then you can move. I think that because of that fear, it stifled me from opportunities like earlier in life, opportunities to learn and grow in a way that I maybe could have earlier. I don't believe in regrets, as you know. I just believe that we are all attracted to different experiences. So I mentioned that because there is a book that changed my life that I recommend to everybody. It's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways, and it's by Susan Jeffers. And I actually was recommended that book by my coach when I left the corporate world like 20 years ago. Or I guess it's now like more like 23.
Right.
25.
Right.
What's in the website?
Just stick with round numbers. With the round numbers. It's fine.
Exactly. Let's not talk about it. I posted about ageism today.
Right.
So anyways, that book transformed my life. And in fact, it actually says it all right there in the title. And for me, I had to learn to embrace the fear and know that by practicing that, because it really is, it's a muscle we have to practice.
Mhm.
That we learn that basically there's nothing on the other side of that other than learning, right? And so the more I practiced it, the more I actually became a manifester,
Mhm.
because I realized that actually by addressing the fear, that's where you're able to take action and move forward.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so for me, I'd say that that is like the biggest lesson for me, is just to move right in. And it doesn't mean that I'm not afraid or that I obviously don't have all the answers, but I also believe in using my resources, whether that be your network or hiring somebody who's an expert at something, or asking an expert who might know more than you know. Uh, and I think that's like one of my gifts too, is actually, which again, I had to learn that too. That was post corporate world.
Yeah.
Uh, Vulnerability is
Mhm.
being okay with not knowing everything, and knowing that the only way that I could learn is by asking,
Mhm.
right?
Right. And not being afraid to, yeah, to ask the question. And, I think part of particularly with the corporate structure, um, there is less forgiveness, and depending on where you are, right?
Mhm,
We talk all the time about, about making mistakes and how fantastic it is to make mistakes, and we learn from those mistakes, and it's all kumbaya. But the
mhm,
reality is, in a lot of situations, especially in work environments, that you're penalized if you make a mistake, right?
mhm,
So, so what I love is that you've given yourself the permission to say, like, it's okay to make the mistake. It's okay to be the one asking the question,
mhm,
even if it might seem like, and because there are really no dumb questions, because you need the answer, right?
mhm.
So even if it seems like the dumb question or the obvious question, it's okay to do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's always a qualifier, right, with the question sometimes. Meaning like, I don't always like to use this phrase, but we were taught it when we were young. It's like, well, this might be a stupid question.
Mhm.
But you can actually phrase it in a way that does make you sound intelligent if we're
Right,
concerned about um, looking like have less information or less knowledge or whatever it might be. And I think that, you know, I've always said this, at least since launching Empower, is that I like to use myself as the role model to
mhm,
make sure that women know, because we know that women are perfectionists. We know that women are afraid to make mistakes and do want to look like the authority.
right.
And so I have always said, I'm happy to use myself as the model, modeling the behavior that, it doesn't have to be perfect to get started.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think that is a big thing, that we have to give ourselves permission for that. Because that's, for me, that's a hard thing too sometimes. So,
Mhm,
um, but I think one of the things I've tried to impart to other people sometimes is, even when something seems really big, like you've never ventured into this and it seems really big. I mean, what's that old saying about how do you eat an elephant? And it's like one bite at a time, right? That,
uh-huh.
like, there's everything you can kind of break down into pieces, right?
Yes.
And so, so you may not, it can be overwhelming when you look at like the big thing, right? But when you just look at the little pieces, okay, well, I can do this little piece this month, or I can do that little piece and say I'll do that in, like, give yourself a timeline and say I'll do that in 2 weeks or whatever.
Well,
But
I love structure because
right,
of being German.
right,
And so, I mean, okay, I'm generalizing,
right.
but I have to say that I think creating successful structures for yourself and measurable, like, it's like when you talk about goals, like I like to use the structure of SMART goals, because SMART goals indicates that it's measurable. And it doesn't mean that it has to be a quantified number, but it's like you can measure the accomplishment by something. And I think for me, I'm constantly measuring my progress,
Mhm.
uh, based upon taking on whether, I mean, you know me, like whether it be like a exercise routine or
Right.
like a goal as far as like launching something, like I have to know that I'm making progress.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be all the time, but I love that you're talking about like, this can be done in 2 weeks and this can be done in 4 weeks,
Right.
because that's really what it is. It's backing out from the time frame.
Right,
You know?
right, right. And I found that that's really helpful about the way when you come to people, whether you're coaching, because you're always coaching, whether you're whether you're actually coaching a client or not, but even as a friend, right? That like
Certainly always observing.
right,
I'll say that.
certainly always observing. But that, yeah, helping people sort of get past, because I think that that's the thing that stops people a lot of times is not knowing, like they see the end goal and not really knowing how to get there, right?
Yes.
So,
Mhm.
and that can be overwhelming. And so kind of on the heels of that, I would ask you sort of, we were talking about this being a big transition year for me, with I guess in some ways I'm sort of an empty nester.
Mhm.
With my daughters
Like
going
way
off.
more empty nester than me at this point. So,
Yes,
all good.
I am, right. And but like, this is a transition time for me. I was going to ask you, so what types of trends have you seen sort of with your female clients right now, or any clients really, I guess,
Yeah.
that about sort of where they are and what choices they're making.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in general right now, coming on the heels of, we're still in a pandemic, but coming out of that 15 plus months of being home and such, it's allowed them the time and the opportunity to actually evaluate if they're in the right place for them,
Mhm.
whether that be right career or frankly like spouses,
Right.
or whether that also be things along the lines of like their physical environment. And when I coach people, I look at things in usually like 8 different categorical areas. And what I would say in general is it's given them permission to say, this is not working.
Mhm.
I need to shift it and I need help and I'm not sure how to get there. Right. Versus, I think before COVID, many people were very task oriented and it
Mhm.
was so stressful and there was no space. And,
Mhm.
you're on the hamster wheel. Right.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
so I think uh, it's shined the light on what wasn't working in
Right.
their lives.
Mhm.
And I feel like there's way more, particularly women, that are moving into like entrepreneurial roles and wanting to step into something that has it's purpose driven,
Mhm.
that's mission based,
Mhm.
whether that be for themselves or working with a company that's more like that, which is why I feel like the wellness industry has really taken off, because the mental health
So
crisis is
huge.
so
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
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 So, well, it's one of the reasons why
Yeah.
mental health or wellness industries have been doing well. So that's really like what I've seen, and I love it. I love, as you know, working with people it lights me up,
Mhm.
to help them identify what's next and
Mhm.
how they're going to get there, and shining the light sometimes on things that are not pretty
Yeah.
but require change.
Yeah. Right. Right. So that
So
you're not in that same rut. I know it's interesting. You kind of went there automatically, but while you were talking, I was thinking about um you that it does bring you joy, I think, especially when you see other people really coming into their own.
yeah.
And that's a really wonderful characteristic about you too, because um you want like coming out the heels for this weekend, it was all about friendship and about supporting, even as much as people were there supporting me, I really wanted to do it to support all of them as well.
Mhm.
And so I was thinking about, as you were talking, you know, how that really brings you joy. And I think that's another one of those things that sort of attracted us to one another,
Mhm.
is that there's not I think feeling safe with someone that's your friend, that you can um, be both, be your strong, be your vulnerable, come with questions, and know that that person has your back is really
Absolutely.
important. So I think even as your clients, or your clients to me, because I've met some over the years, and even as our first women's group that we were in, that's something that I think is a universal for you, because I think, like I said, seeing people achieve their goals brings you joy as well.
Oh, yeah.
So
So I think the thing is, everything for me is not competitive with anyone. In fact, actually, I can remember when you and I first met. Um, you and I talked about like competition, and you were like, I'm never competitive with anybody else but me. It is my journey, my time frame, like it's my goal. This is not about anybody else. And I think actually for me, like I think that I've worked in some really, just like you, competitive cutthroat environments. And I think for me, it's always been about my journey and me supporting other people and getting to where they want to go. Like I always think about like, always to the point of like almost like losing sight of my own goal sometimes, like if we look back to the days where I had that women's running group that I used to run, part of the reason why I started that group was because I wanted everybody to keep growing and I wanted to have fun with people. And after, I think it was after Cece, wasn't it? Yeah. So after my baby, I started that women's running group because I was like, I don't have anybody to run with anymore. We need a running group. So I started the Woody Run. Right. And, all those women ran a half marathon, which was amazing. However, I lost sight of my own goal. Like my goal was to get faster. And in fact, I got slower.
Oh, right.
And part of the reason why I got slower was because I was so concerned about everybody else finishing, and making sure everybody was having fun, and congregating the group. So setting a boundary on those types of things for myself. But yes, for me,
but that was a learning for you. That was a learning lesson.
Yeah, it was. And there's no greater joy for me than seeing people succeed.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Totally.
So, okay. So on the heels of that, kind of when it comes to for yourself, like visualizing, because I know you're also into visualization, right? And so when you think about the next phase for you, what are you seeing for yourself?
Great question. It's an interesting thing. So most certainly I see right now are we talking about career or just in general?
Either one, right?
Let's talk about career.
Okay, we'll talk about career first.
So most certainly I see the podcast continuing to grow. I love interviewing different women. I love learning through their journeys. And I don't think I'm only going to be interviewing women. I think there'll be a lot of men that are on the podcast as well. So I could see that continuing to grow. I think I've shared this with you, but I'm not sure. But I definitely, see more destination-based quarterly retreats. And so I think that's the way, like a few women were asking over this weekend with you, like, oh, are you going to be doing more groups? What's happening with that? And I think like I love the groups, but I think that I can impact larger audiences if I do an intensive instead of doing like 9 months together or whatever it is, or getting on a Zoom call or Facebook Live or whatever the different modalities that we're all using right now. I prefer to do intensives with people, and that's kind of, and I love to travel, and I love logistics and planning and stuff like that. So I think that all ties into those things. I also actually haven't really said this out loud, but I can see, I said it out loud to some people, but not like to my podcast audience. I also see myself doing more collaborations in the wellness community, and working with more experts in that community. So I continue to grow because I'm, as you know, lifelong learner, and I love pushing myself to learn new things and understanding it. And And also become a better expert at being versus doing. I would say that's another really important component for me.
Yeah.
So those are some very, and I've been loving doing one-on-one coaching again. I actually really it's been so great for me, versus like the groups are great, but you can only go so deep.
Right. You can only connect on a certain level.
I like to go deep. So
right.
Let's go deep.
We're all crying. No.
Exactly. I like to make you cry.
Right. Make you cry.
Yeah.
So, okay. So then you said, I see that actually tied. So that is, it is a career goal, but that's also a personal goal, right?
Yes.
And that, because you're sort of, for you, that's sort of bringing together the two loves, right? So it's the work side of it, which is bringing the groups of people together, creating connectedness, working with them during that setting. But it's also for you because you're still creating these connections with others in the wellness community, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of helps you to do both a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think like at this stage in my life, I can clearly see the integration. Like, even this weekend when we were up in Napa and celebrating and such, like for me, yes, like I love personal growth and the spirituality component and all of that. But I also like to have fun.
Right.
So, it has to be the balance.
Right.
Of like the fun with the depth.
Right.
So like that's like I see it be similar to like it has lightheartedness together too, not just like, oh, we're going to go to a silent retreat for 2 weeks.
Yeah. It's got to be a mixture too.
Exactly.
It's kind of like,
because I like to see all sides of people. Like because I don't put somebody in a box and be like, oh, they're this way only, because none of us are just one way, right? So this weekend, for example, I was thinking to myself, oh, I've interviewed some of these people. They see me as a professional.
Right.
Now I'm in front
now
of
what are they going to think? No kidding.
Whoa, this is a whole other thing. I'm still a professional.
Right. Well, yeah, and the same for them. And I think that's the other part of it, that people, again, have to feel comfortable enough, because even with the women's groups, it takes, because it's these, there's so much else going on. People are coming to this sort of after work, or they're coming and, then they have to get back and deal with family or deal, whatever, that they're only sort of half invested there. And it takes longer for that reason. With the retreat, you can obviously move faster through the process. I'm sorry, my voice is like totally going. Sorry.
It's okay.
Time for more tea.
Same boat. That's what happens when you party too much.
Exactly. And I'll be on a detox for a while. So with that too, I guess, excuse me. We've talked about kind of like what opportunities you're looking for yourself. What's kind of a red flag for you when you say, no, I don't need to go there? And I will say, has that changed for you?
Oh, thank you for asking that question.
Right.
Are we talking about the word boundaries?
Right.
So it's interesting because, I'm a yes person, and I'm also a pleaser. And I like to be liked and I like to be acknowledged. Right. So sounds pretty human.
Right.
However, I think along with that comes like setting a boundary on what's important, right? So I think we talk about this a lot, but values and being aligned with what is important to you and what you want to create in your life and where you're making choice from is super important. So, when I launched EmpowHer, I went wide, and I knew I was going wide because I kind of needed to see like, well, what is really, what is sticking for me? Okay. So it's a little different than like when you're in the corporate world and you're like, this is my business plan. These are my product offerings. This is where I'm seeing my revenues come from and my P&L, right? I was very like, let's try this. I know where the money's coming from, where the revenue stream's coming from. but let's see, like when the community asked for girls' confidence groups, I was like, well, yeah, I'm a mother of 3 girls. And yes, we can talk about confidence. And I'm super confident talking about that. But is that what I really want to do? Or am I have my own kids? Like, you know, I personally don't want to focus on teenagers or kids, you know? So I think that for me, that I had to learn the hard way how to set boundaries in some cases. And I think that I'm more clear about what I want now, like, you know, through experience. So why do I do experiential workshops? Is because everybody's a different kind of learner, right? So when I, for example, let's just use the example of somebody interviewing for a job, and you looked at their LinkedIn profile, you look at their resume, and you're like, oh, they're fully qualified, right? Then you actually get on the phone with them and you experience them, and you're, or in person,
like,
and you're like, whoa, no. Because so much is about connection, right? And so, and experience. It's like when you're going in to interview for a job, you're interviewing as well. Like, do you want to, so big deal that it's Google or Amazon or some of the big people, big players out there right now, right? But do you see yourself in that environment? And so I've had opportunities in the last year where I've been like, well, I can make a lot of money, you know, or I could do whatever it is, but is that what I want? And I had to really get honest about the boundary of what I want, and that it's not about just saying yes. It's like, yes, and, or no, and, or no, not for right now. And so that is like really about like how I kind of see these next couple of years playing out for myself. And like I said, like I went really wide and I was really busy. We were running so many women's groups, so many workshops, work. I mean, I think back and I'm like, wow, how did I do all that? Like, but that is me, as you know. But did I want to be Brene Brown or, you know, Mel Robbins, or like, is that who I wanted to be? Like, I mean, then I'd have to invest a ton of more money. And is that it? So right now, I think like I can see myself playing in some ponds, not all of them.
Well, and I think it's also, like you said, learning, you know, sometimes when you cast a wider net initially, it helps you, like you said, find out what you're interested in as well, see what the marketplace also is needing, right? And find that sweet spot between the two, right? Between what you want and what's available there as well. And sometimes it allows you to create a whole new niche, right?
Absolutely.
That you is not currently being satisfied, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like Beauty Counter, that role of me working on Beauty Counter was a perfect example of wanting to say no so badly, like, and said it several times, but then was like, well, why not? And honestly, like, I mean, Christine Gardner, who I have also interviewed, was not wrong. Like, why would you leave money on the table? But not only that, like it opened this whole other expertise in clean beauty and direct selling and all these things that I was not an expert in. And yes, I made money and I continue to make money. So it's like, well, I could have said no and then yes to a different opportunity, but that was fine for then and in that current stage that I was in. Definitely
keeps that sorry, keeps that going. So now it's, you know, having known you so long, I know that this has also been a journey. You sort of touched on this at the beginning where you're like, you know, where you said, you know, you actually used to not be fearful of new experiences, but you were much more cautious, right? I think it's, you know, as you said, a product of also your upbringing, and but maybe it's being the third, being the little sister that like
they muted me,
but I've seen this journey, so it's sort of like, you know, you knew that about yourself, right? And so you consciously said, okay, I'm going to begin to embrace more things, right? And then you kind of also had to learn to pull back too, right?
Absolutely.
You know, as is, you still have the cray away? Do
Yes,
you
I
still
do.
have it?
Ooh, I need to get that. I should go get it from the other room so we can continue the conversation.
Right.
Let's talk about the
So
crayaway.
let's
Go
talk
ahead,
about the
ask your
crayaway.
question as I go get the crayaway.
Okay, I will. So Michelle, one Christmas I gave her this a mocked up bottle of what we call crayaway because I felt like she needed
There
a
it is.
symbol. Yes, this was a symbol of a symbolic reminder when she needed to create boundaries for people, and that she would just.
It was the perfect gift.
So this is not a real product, but maybe it should be. But yeah, but I think that was at the time my way of saying to you, like, okay.
Can I read what you wrote on the back?
Oh yeah, sure, that's
okay. And by the way, Kevin, thank you so very much. Her son actually created this. He's a graphic designer. He lives in Chicago. He's amazing. Okay, it says for emergency use only. Directions to the girl who has everything except the ability to ward off crazy people. Your very own bottle of crayaway. When words alone just don't seem to work, simply point and spray and watch the crazies run away. By the way, let's face it, it's on my bookshelf. Right. But it's very rare that I actually read that.
Yeah, right. So, but I think over time you've come to be able to, what my point being, you've come to create these boundaries for yourself much better now.
Yes.
You know, but it was, my point is putting it in perspective. It may have seemed like mistakes that got you to create that boundary, but they weren't. They were lessons you needed to learn too, right?
Absolutely.
So you know, sort of going full circle in our conversation, both professionally and personally, that sometimes we do have to go through these things, and very difficult things sometimes, in order to begin to grow ourselves, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, you're but anyway, that's neither here nor there, I guess, but I'm glad that you brought that out.
No, I actually think, you know, boundaries are not easy. I mean, they're very easy for some people. So some people are like super clear and they're like, that's it, you know?
Right.
And it's interesting. I've had some recent interactions when we think about being vulnerable and opening yourself up and like trusting that it's okay to make this acquaintance or relationship or work partner or whatever, right? And because sometimes they've been with people, it's life is so different now, right? You used to make your connections, and you still do, but like based on like long-standing relationships with people that introduced you to this person. And obviously those are very that's an easier way to say yes to an opportunity or a relationship.
Well, yeah, you feel like it's been vetted in a way.
It's safe. Yeah, it's safer, right? And more recently, because of social media and also different opportunities, you are faced with making the decision, like, is it safe? And because of my crayaway, you know, I had to actually stop and say, like, is it safe for me? Are you actually just being fearful, or is it okay for you to step in?
Right.
And but did it with way more certainty and definitely had caution on some levels, but decided to step in anyways.
Right.
We're learning.
That's kind of leading to the next question, I guess, is your criteria kind of for deciding an opportunity for yourself. Like, do you have one, or is it just you kind of, well, and I can't say go with your gut, because there's clearly some things that you're already looking for, right? But but I think, you know, one of the things that you often talk about too is sort of trusting yourself, right? And you know, that's something you have to learn how to do, right? You know, I mean, there's some of us who are blessed enough to come and are very self-assured, but most of us not, right? Like we talked about before, you've had experiences or you've been reprimanded or whatever. So it sort of takes away that gut instinct that we often need to really listen to.
Mhm.
So how, when you're in a situation when someone is approaching you, because I know particularly in this last year, you've had a lot of things that come up that, you know, you either said yes or no to, right? How do you distinguish between, or maybe make sure that you listen to your gut in those situations?
That's a great question. I like that a lot. So for me, actually, often it's, you know, I start with, you know, I do this with my clients, but I start with my vision and my purpose, and
Mhm.
it's actually put in my book at the beginning of every year, usually, or I do it at like every 6 months. And my purpose kind of goes into what my goals are, and the goals are broken into financial goals, personal goals, professional
Mhm.
goals, all that kind of stuff. So when I start to evaluate criteria of an opportunity, I always go back to the reflection of what is it that I want
Mhm.
and how does this serve me?
Mhm.
Is
Right.
this in alignment with my values? And are these people or this opportunity something that I choose to want to be participating in? Because
Mhm.
it's a choice, like it's
Yeah.
my choice. They're
Right.
offering me an opportunity or offering me an introduction, but
Mhm.
I don't have to take the opportunity.
Right.
So, and honestly, like if I don't feel that it's aligned with me or
Mhm.
what I'm trying to create, then the answer is no, not
Right.
for now. No for
Right.
now. You know, because the go for no book, and
Mhm.
there's getting to yes. Getting to
Right.
Yes is one of my favorite books.
Right. Right.
Power
Right.
of Negotiation. I love that.
Right.
I actually have it right here to share with my client this
Oh,
afternoon.
there it is. There you go.
So, you know, I think that I certainly have criteria, but it actually starts in my with my rooted intuition, and I'm really clear on my intuition. It's like super honed in now.
Mhm.
And I always say this. I've said this to you before. Like, I'm going to make an assessment on this person.
Right.
However, I have every right to change my mind.
To change my mind later on. Yes. Right.
And in fact, actually, like if we look at this last weekend, I'm like, oh, she's really nice. You're like, oh, no. Like,
I know. I'd be like, I told you.
I told you
Right.
like 8 years ago that you guys would be friends.
Right.
So I think that I think it is important to have criteria on how you assess and evaluate transition, change, opportunities.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's really important to be honest with yourself. Like so many people get caught up in the ego
Mhm.
that they don't make it out of the ego because they're concerned about what other people think, not what they want. And it's
Mhm.
about what you want when
Mhm.
you're creating your life, your change, your choice, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's very true. And if you were to say, you know, part of me was thinking about, um, you know, we both have daughters,
Mhm.
and not that you wouldn't do this with your sons as well, but I think it's a different process for them. Um, I think, you know, also having been a child and a girl child, I think there's like I was talking about earlier, like a confidence that has to come through some experiences, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so it's kind of a two-part question, but one which I think would be interesting to hear about is what you would say to your young self
Mm.
about what is to come, right?
Mhm.
And well, and then I'll get to the second part of it.
Okay.
But like, if you
About
could,
what is to come, or yeah, okay.
like,
Well,
what is to come in life, you know,
it's
to the young.
interesting because I think about this often with parenting, right? And I think there are, you know, we always say like it's your journey, it's
Mhm.
measured on your time frame,
Right,
not on anybody else's, right?
right.
And people can always tell you that, but really it's like honestly, I feel like we have the wisdom that we see that, right?
Mhm. Right.
And I think I can recall having conversations with bosses where I'm like, uh, why is she doing that?
Mhm.
Or why did he get that? Or have you seen all the grammar mistakes on his paper or whatever, you know? I did some things when I was younger. And so I can understand now that it was about my journey and it happening in my time frame.
Mhm.
And I think I was a bit of a like a late bloomer emotionally. Like, I mean, I think I was always heightened intuition,
Mhm.
super sensitive. Like, my sisters, we had these names in the family. They would call me priceless and she was precious and the other one was princess.
You were so
And
sensitive, right?
I was so sensitive, and they'd be
Right.
like, "Where's Michelle?" And like somebody would be like, "Oh, she's picking her tears."
Right.
And say like somebody's picking their nose, like, "Oh, she's picking her tears." Well, really, I think it was like I just was like a feeler, and like I could feel everything so deeply that people experienced, which is I think what makes me really good at my job, right? But
Mhm.
I think that um, what I would tell my younger self, and I had this conversation with the boss once actually,
Mhm.
and I'll get to that, but I would tell my younger self that it's like, you're good enough, you're worthy,
Mhm.
keep going, and keep being the determined, resilient girl that you are, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
Um, and my boss, who, God bless his soul, he was actually my best boss ever, Robert Lazarus. He passed away, but he told me once when I was like in my 20s, he was like, "Who made you so tough?"
Mhm.
Because he
Mhm.
actually said to me, "I think you should use so and so as a role model. They're polished, they're blah, blah, blah." And
Mhm.
I was like, "Oh, so you're asking me to be a kiss ass?"
Right.
He was
You want me
like,
to be more of a kiss ass? Is that what you're saying?
"Exactly,
Right.
exactly." And he's like, "No, that's not what I'm saying. She's this, she's that." And I looked at him and I was like, "Look, it might take me 10 years longer to go where I want to go, but all I know is when I got there, I was me. I wasn't anybody else. So
Right.
don't ever use that example again on me
Right.
because
Right.
I don't want to be her."
Right.
Okay.
Right. Right.
So that's what I would probably say. It's
Mhm.
about your journey, it's nobody else's.
Right. Right. Yeah. Because I mean, and then that's sort of tied. I know I
Like,
think we've
stop making
talked.
comparisons. Like, it's like,
Right. I mean, I think that there is a fine point of like learning, like you can see how other people are doing things, right? And
mhm,
sort of taking the pieces from that. You're like, oh, okay. And you can see, does that sort of work for you?
mhm,
But I know we've talked, speaking of like good bosses and I say more crazy
mhm.
bosses. Um, but I do remember lots, I did have a lot of like nutty bosses, right?
Oh my God.
And some great, but some nutty, and I felt like they were dealing with a lot of their own insecurities. And even as a young person, I mean, you can see that, right? And I think I may have told you the story of one who like came out and was like screaming and hollering at like the whole, our whole group or whatever. And they were like, I'm not gonna let you fuck up my career to like
Oh yeah.
everybody. And so she goes back in her office and then I'm standing there and I was like, oh no, you're gonna do that all on your own
Right.
because because of what was like, she was great, but because of what was going on in her own head, she was defeating herself to me.
Mhm.
Um, and I think those are things you can also observe as a young person, right? Not saying like you want to be that person or because sometimes it's the opposite scenario,
Mhm.
right? But I think you take characteristics because there were some other things that were great about her,
Mhm.
and so no one is just this kind of one thing. But like you said before, it's kind of like all the sides. And so you have to look at, you know, that person and sort of their journey and which is different from your journey,
And by
right?
the way, I think like the interesting thing is to your point is like the person he was referencing is amazing, but
Right,
she's her and I
right,
can't be her because if I tried
right,
to be her, I would not be in alignment with who I am
right,
and I would have been miserable. And
right,
so, and I mean, I think, like you said, we learn from other people. So
right,
we can try to adopt certain things because there are some like a lot of amazing things about this
right,
woman. But yeah, not me. Like, which is
right,
by the way, I didn't want to stay in entertainment is like
right,
aren't we all just people?
Right, exactly. All experiencing the same journey, right? And really all wanting the same things, to be honest. But,
Yes.
What do you feel like you've learned or gained from our relationship?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, you're a very rational, pragmatic person. And you have
That was a nice way of putting it.
Yes, you have a lot of other amazing gifts, but I think that when you make a decision, you're super clear, and you've already processed it, right? So you don't actually come back. You do sometimes, but like very rarely are you like, ooh, I'm not sure now,
Right.
I think that I'm a Libra, and as we know, and so Libras waffle on decision making often. I think I've gotten way better about that as I got older, but I think that I weigh out so many different options and phases often, that like I spend so much time in the reflection and analysis, that sometimes, like, even when I've made the decision, I'm still like, well, maybe it would have been better. And this is something simple, but like, maybe I should have bought the blue one instead,
Right.
And so I think that's something that like you've taught me to be more clear, and also like something more specifically that I can remember. Like I think because I am confident and I come off very directed, that sometimes people can use me as like a target, like, and they like to impose blame on me for different things. And I think through the years, what I've always really loved about you is that you've been very clear. Like you'll say things to people like, we never are doing something because we're specifically trying to hurt one another or hurt a person.
Right.
And I think that that's something that you've really taught me about myself, because of course, I never, ever want to hurt anybody. Like that's not who I am at my core at all. But sometimes, as you know, like I can be curt, and it takes me a while to get there. But when I get there and I'm like, I'm done, and people are suddenly like, oh my God, where's the nice Michelle? And well, this has been inside for 6 months and I'm sick of hearing about it.
Right.
And so I think you are really good at being a reflector for me, of reminding me, because sometimes I could be really harsh on myself. And you'll be really good at reminding me, like, that's not who you are. Like, doesn't even make sense. And let me tell you why. And that's where I think your rational, pragmatic side really comes in. So I thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Well, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So
fun.
Thank you for asking me. Right.
You're welcome. I'm really grateful. Like, I am super grateful to have this time with you this morning. And I think it's important that people get to know me and understand different parts of me, and why I make choice the way I do, and my background and all that stuff. But if there's any time for people out there in the audience that you ever have a question for me, the thing about me is I am always available. Like, I will always make time for you. May be hard to get on my calendar, but I will always make time to answer any question, because I want people to learn from my journey, and that's how we all get there. It's by holding hands together and being one. That's really it.
That's it.
All right.
I'm glad that we've been on this journey. I'm glad that we've been on this journey together. Motherhood, parenthood, wives, workers. Like, I'm glad, Exactly. So thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much for joining me today on the Opportunity Knocks podcast by EmpowHer Purpose and me, Michelle Valenzuela-Wolf. If opportunity is knocking at your door, feel free to take inspiration from the journeys of our diverse female entrepreneurs. Their tips and transparency are all available on the Opportunity Knocks podcast. Thank you for your support, and subscribe now.